Hi, True Avatars, and welcome to your weekly queer video game podcast. This is episode 53, and I am your host, Zoe Wild. I am a transgender and bisexual woman, and my pronouns are she, her. So, this week's episode is a little bit different. It's just me. It's a special episode, because I just got back from Montreal. I took the train out there, I took the train back for the weekend, because out in Montreal this weekend was the first since 2018 in-person Queerness and Games Conference, or QGCon for short, which is what I'm going to be calling it, because like the acronym of the, like the queer acronym, I also don't say the acronym every time I say queer. So I'll call it QGCon for short, but it's called the Queerness and Games Conference. And so it's been remote since the pandemic. So this is their first time going back to in-person. And I heard about it, I think in June or early July. And immediately I was like, this sounds like something I have to talk about on the podcast. It'd be a great place to meet queer gamers, queer developers, people in the queer gaming space in general. And honestly, just like, yeah, it just seemed like the perfect place to go, basically. Sorry, I'm a little bit tired. You have to bear with me. It's been a long weekend. I'm now recording this Sunday night at 10:30 at night. So just bear with me here as I get my bearings, but I have a lot of show notes, to like a lot of notes on the convention, or the conference rather, to get through. And at times it felt like a convention. There was like this arcade, and, that's where I was like most excited. Like the panels were great, but like as soon as the arcade opened, like I went right over there. And I'll explain a little bit about what that is later. But anyway, hi True Avatars, Future Zoe popping in here just to, I forgot to record this, so I'm just popping in here, to do a little bit of housekeeping, and ask a few quick favors of you. So if you like this podcast, please leave a comment, rating, or review on your preferred podcast platform. Spotify has ratings and comments, while Apple has reviews. Engagement like comments, ratings, and reviews helps to grow the podcast, and a growing podcast means a happy podcast host who is forever happy and fulfilled that you enjoy listening to her ramblings, which creates an infinite feedback loop of more happiness, more podcast episodes, and more growth, and everything else. So please go leave a comment, rating, or review on your preferred podcast platform. Also, if you're watching the video version on YouTube, please like this episode, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe, as well as hit the notification bell to get notifications for when a new episode or a new piece of content drops. Also, please follow True Avatars, a queer video game podcast, on social media. Their accounts on Blue Sky, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, Facebook, and TikTok at True Avatars. And you can also find the podcast on the official website, trueavatarspodcast.com. That's all one word, trueavatarspodcast.com. And remember, this is a weekly queer video game podcast, so check in every week. I'm going to bring you news, interviews, and updated discussions that are relevant to queer gamers. So you have a safe space to check in on the world of gaming from a 2S LGBTQIA+ lens. All right, let's get back to it. I just want to kind of like give you the lay of the land, and kind of tell you what it was all about. So, it took place at BANQ, or the acronym BANQ, which is, in French here. My accent is going to be terrible and I apologize, but it's the, Bibliothèque et Archives Nationales du Québec. So basically a library and archive, like National Archive. It was a 3-day event. So, day one on Friday was all remote. So day 2 was in person and day 3 was in person. So the Saturday and Sunday were in person at the, Bibliothèque and National Archives in Quebec. I didn't attend day 3. I went to day 1 and I went to day 2. But just the way it worked out, with like work and train schedules, getting back to my pets, my pet sitter had to leave and work on Monday. I have to wash my hair, like it's a whole routine. It's like a production, to be honest. And I need time for it to dry, and I can't like wear headphones while it's drying, and I need to wear headphones for work. So it's just like, anyway, all that is to say is that I couldn't go to day 3, and I'm very sad about that, because days 1 and 2 were amazing, but especially day 2, because that's where the arcade was. But I'll get to that. It was a COVID conscious event, so there's going to be some footage, that I have later, some interviews that I got in person, and you'll see us all wearing masks. It's actually the only place that I've seen recently be COVID conscious, which is both amazing and sad at the same time. So kudos to them for enforcing that. and also for everyone who came for actually like following it, because like when I go out in public these days, like on trains and buses, like no one's wearing masks anymore. There's like tons of gaming events in person, even Fan Expo here in Toronto, like no one was wearing masks. And it's so crowded. So, yeah, so basically there was like a few elements to this. So there was lots of panels, both in person and remote. And so on Friday, yeah, they were all remote panels. Saturday, Sunday, they were in person, but they were all streaming remotely as well. What was nice too is that like there were a bunch of different, like prices you could pay for your ticket to go. Like there was pay what you want / pay what you can. And then there were like other options depending on like what package you wanted. I'll admit I didn't look too closely. I paid for like the default ticket, which I think was 175 Canadian, I believe. It might have been a little bit less because I think Quebec tax might have been removed when I made my purchase. Not 100% sure, but it was all through Eventbrite. It was like super great. But in this game, so Queerness and Games, like that's the name of the conference. And that includes TTRPGs, board games, card games, and of course video games. So like it covers all kinds of games. Obviously I went with a focus on video games. I don't cover TTRPGs. I don't cover board games. I don't cover card games, although I play a lot of board games and card games. I was a little worried about my presence at the conference because first off, I'm like a content creator. Some people have referred to me as press, although, I guess I technically am press, but I would like to consider myself a journalist to some extent and like press, but also like, I don't know that like some person making like YouTube videos and podcasts counts as press, but either way, the point was I knew that like holding a mic and camera to people's faces, interviewing them, asking for like contact information and like, hey, I want to talk about your thing on my podcast. Like that can be intimidating. Sometimes press, podcast, content creators, they get a bad rap. So I really didn't want to intrude on a space where I wasn't welcome, despite being queer, despite being involved in video games and interested in video games. And also trying to like talk about and feature this event and these developers positively. So anyway, there was a lot of developers at this conference. And so I did send an email, back to the conference back in July, just to make sure everything was kind of cool with it. And when I got there, I was like also super like careful not to overstep. I was like, hey, if I want to like inbox some people who are at the conference and like ask for an interview, like, is this cool? So I just made sure not to like overstep my boundaries. But honestly, everyone at the conference was super amazing and welcoming and inclusive. And it was like, honestly, just kind of like big gay vibes all weekend, which was super great. And there were also some people that weren't exactly developers, but they were like masters and PhD students too. So like, I could honestly see this event becoming something bigger, more like a kind of a convention conference hybrid someday down the road. I don't know if that's the vision for it or if it's just supposed to be this small, wholesome thing. But I think like, first off, it was a great safe space, but second off, like, how often do you get to go to places where it's like just queer gaming? Back in, early July, I think it was. It might have been late June, early July. It was episode 40. I covered a showcase called the Press Gay to Play Showcase, which is all queer video games from start to finish. In fact, there's one game actually that was at the conference that was featured in that showcase that I got to meet the devs. I got to play their demo. But anyway, it's just like I can start to see these inklings of like queer focused spaces for video games and just gaming in general start to bud and bloom and flourish. And it'd be really cool if this did become something a little bit bigger, something a little bit more well known. Again, I'm not sure if the organizers want that, but I think it would be cool if that was something that grew from this. And also people were coming from all over the world. It was a lot of Canadians and Americans, obviously, because it's like easy for us to get there over versus say like flying, but there's people from all over. What was really nice was that food was provided, mainly probably because it was like more of conference format than like convention, which was nice too, because like in the morning when you're trying to get somewhere, you're trying to get to the conference, like it's just nice to have food provided, and all the food was like super considerate of dietary restrictions, or at least for the record, it was just like for my dietary restrictions. I am a pescatarian who can't have dairy, but I still eat eggs and fish. So sometimes that just makes me a vegan. So I try to, like, if I don't know if there's dairy in something or there's a risk of meat, I just eat vegan. And so there's like a lot of vegan options at the table, which is really nice. I mentioned the remote panels. I mentioned there were in-person panels. They were all recorded, and I did get confirmation that they will be on YouTube and the QGCon website at some point in the future. I don't know when that will be, but I will update the True Avatar socials when that content is available, because there's some stuff I didn't get to check out. Like there were panels happening like concurrently with each other, like 2 or 3 different panels, and I can't be in 3 places at once. So there were ones I missed out on that I would love to check out. And also once I hit the arcade, I missed out on all the panels that were happening because I wanted to network. I wanted to interview devs. I wanted to play demos. So, hopefully next year I can bring someone else to kind of like double up on the workload. Although this podcast would probably be like hours long if we did. So I'm not sure. Still figuring out the logistics. But anyway, all that is to say is that these panels should be online at some point in the future, both on the QGCon YouTube channel and the QGCon website. But yeah, the organizers honestly did an amazing job with this. It was great. The vibes, just everything, the format, everything was super inclusive and friendly and accessible and approachable. Accessibility is important too, but like, people underestimate the importance of like approachability, which is like a lot of people kind of use those terms interchangeably, but I mean like seeing something that you are interested in, but also feeling comfortable enough to attend or go to it and know that like you are welcome there. So anyway, yeah, I just think the organizers did an amazing job. They were super friendly. Anytime I, stopped one of the organizers or ran into an organizer, crossed paths with an organizer just to talk to them, and also just like, hey, is it cool if like as the only content creator at this show, as far as I know, I was the only content creator. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I know I was the podcaster in the Discord. Everyone was super friendly and inclusive. Especially with something that happened to me on the Friday, which I'm going to get into in a little bit. But I'm going to kind of walk you through my audience, just kind of like how the event went, who spoke, who I spoke to. So on Friday, the conference started at noon remotely. So I was at my Airbnb and I ordered some food in, because that morning I had met someone, so I didn't have time to go and get food. So I think I Ubered in some food, and Kaylin, one of the organizers, I'm not sure if they were the lead organizer or if it was like a group of like everyone was kind of equally organizing, but Kaylin gave lovely opening remarks, setting the vibe for the remote online only portion of the conference and like the conference overall. So anyway, I settled in with some food to watch the first panel, which was just a little bit after the opening remarks. And, yeah, so there was, let me just kind of get my bearings here. So Paige Ashlyn, who's a producer, games engineer, and pixel artist, I believe also an organizer, was in the middle of talking about her very interesting Yurivania series, which is exactly what it sounds like, by the way. Oh, and I should also mention Paige Ashlyn worked on 2064 Read Only Memories, but at the conference was specifically talking about the Yurivania series. Like I said, which is exactly what it sounds like. And so, basically talking about how game development can work well if you create games for your polycule, your friends, or your loved ones. Which I thought was actually a super interesting point of view, like creating content, creating games, just creating anything for like a very specific target audience, like a very small, based in like love and not so much like checking boxes or this nebulous, like, oh, I want to create it for like this thing for queer people. Like I created this podcast for queer people, but also queer people are like a huge community with like different tastes and different thoughts. Like there's a lot, like on an individual level, but also like each like part of the acronym is also very different. So like it's kind of a balancing act, right? So like making the podcast, like if I was making this podcast for like my partner, for example, I don't currently have a partner, but like when I did have a partner, if I was making this for her, it would be like very easy to understand what she likes and doesn't like and tune the experience to her likes and needs, right? So I thought that was very interesting. And I was just starting to really get into it when the electronic lock on my Airbnb whirred and the door swung open and someone just like walked in, like straight up, like someone I've never seen before in my life, just like walked into the Airbnb unit. No knocking. They later claimed they knocked. They definitely didn't. They also claimed they didn't know if anyone was in the room. definitely was, because I was blasting from the speakers on my computer the conference, which I could later, when I left my unit to check to see if I could hear the conference from outside, I definitely could. So like, this person had no excuse, but it freaked me the hell out. And so in all the zany stuff going on, I had to find, I had to get out, I had to pack up, I had to find a new place. Excuse me. Just gonna take a sip of water. I had to find somewhere to go, and I had to find a new place to stay. All while communicating with the Airbnb people, and letting like friends and actually some people at the conference know that like I'm okay. So I basically spent most of the day missing the conference, which pisses me off quite a bit, if I'm being honest. Like, not only was I like scared out of my mind by this event, but all, like this happening, but also like I like missed what I came to Montreal for, which is crappy. So one nice thing though that happened was that I told, there was like a breakout room, kind of like a thread on the Discord, for people who wanted to maybe watch the panels online, but like in person together. So someone had a hotel room. Excuse me again. I'm so sorry. Had a hotel room and invited me to join the small group of us to watch the panel. And so I was able to stay for like maybe an hour or so to watch some of the panels before I had to go check in at my new hotel. But this whole group of people was very sweet and welcoming and accommodating. And as someone there even recognized, they were a follower of the podcast on Blue Sky, which was super cool. And they were all super cool. I was like, by the way, I'm like pressed. Like, I hope like, like nothing that is talked about in here. Like, I'll keep my mouth shut. Like, I'm super respectful, and everyone is like super, super cool and inviting and welcoming and just like honestly so kind. But because I got to see some of the panels there, those are the ones I'm going to talk about, because those are the ones I got to see, right? So there were 2 games here and 2 people that were talking about their games, basically. So 1 person per game, that's what they were talking about. First up was Chris Schroyer, and he made a game called 3 Days to Chicago. So for anyone who doesn't know, Chris Schroyer is a senior designer and consultant who used to work for Telltale Games. So most notably, worked on The Walking Dead and The Wolf Among Us. And I'm not sure, I missed the part of the presentation where pronouns were introduced. I think his pronouns are he, him. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But after working at Telltale Games, he made this game called 3 Days to Chicago. And 3 Days to Chicago, I'm reading from the Steam page here, is a visual novel about self-discovery, emotional intimacy, and the possibility presented in new relationships. Players are asked to make decisions to help Aaron, a video game artist stuck in a rut, find direction in his personal, professional, and romantic lives. Early in a cross-country train trip, Aaron meets Paul, a young at heart daddy bear with his own insecurities and challenges. Over the next 3 days, the pair find themselves drawn closer together and explore the connections between their lives, hopes, and fears. As the train glides towards its final stop, the two must decide where they go from here. Are they friends, a vacation fling, a misconnection, or could this lead to something else? So that's the Steam description. And so Chris was specifically talking about, and I think he also likes to be called Schroyer, so I might call him that as well throughout this, so if I use them interchangeably, but Schroyer was talking about how he went on a train jam. Basically took a 3-day trip from San Francisco to New York City as research to make the game. So he talked quite a bit about that, but he also talked about this idea of attainable fantasy, which is basically real life things that you can actually achieve, like falling in love, for example, like completing chores, basically, like in your real life, like cleaning your room, for example. Like that's just, I don't know if he said that specific example, but that was what I kind of like extrapolated from that, because like he was saying like how a lot of video games are like sci-fi, fantasy, and like they have these like this like unattainable version of fantasy where like you go and you like fight monsters, or you go out and like do things that you literally physically cannot do in this world. And he wanted to make a game that like was more about attainable fantasy, and take note of that to your avatars, because we're going to come back to that a little bit later on another game that I got to demo. But basically Schroyer was talking about how the mundane can also be important. And how to make your visual novel stand out when a lot of visual novels look like anime visual novels. And also putting your life experience into your work. So, there was a lot in this panel, but in the interest of time, I am going to move on a little bit, but I highly recommend when this panel goes up, checking it out. It was super interesting. And also, like, again, I'm going to link in the show notes all the games that I talk about in the podcast. So you'll be able to find the Steam store, like the Steam page or the itch page. I think in one instance there is no page for either of them, but I've linked the developer in the show notes as well. And then so right after Chris Schroeder was on, Anna C. Webster had a panel as well. And Anna C. Webster, she has worked as a writer and narrative designer on many games, a focus on horror games, but 2 games, most recent examples, games that I promise you will have heard of. One of them is Vampire the Masquerade's Bloodlines 2, and the other is The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, which is super cool. I had like a little bit of a fangirl moment when hearing that. But ultimately, she talked about this vampire game with Arrow Ace representation she made called Redjackets. And so I might have misheard this when she was introducing herself, but I think she introduced herself as an Arrow Ace menace of some repute. So, again, I'm not sure if that's what she said. I might have missed it, but or misheard it. But anyway, Redjackets. So, this vampire game, I'm just going to quote from the Steam page as well, or actually the itch page, sorry. Roscoe Jepson has to die. But a man like that, a fine art dealer at the head of a massive organized crime ring, and a vampire at that, won't go down easy. But the Redjackets aren't your typical vampire hunting firm. In fact, they hardly hunt at all. The Redjackets, sometimes known as the Red Jacket Association International, or RJIA, have both humans and vampires in their employ, matching each one of each to work in pairs to solve vampire relations issues in a nonviolent manner, if at all possible, be that mediation, brokering treaties, and creative problem solving. Only after all other avenues are exhausted is violence the answer. Because unfortunately, in Chicago's underworld, violence is sometimes the answer. Only one thing is certain. Roscoe Jepson has to die. But how? That's up to you. So that's the description. So Anna was talking about queer platonic relationships. Again, I'm not Arrow Ace, so if I say anything that like comes off as insensitive, I apologize. Again, I didn't catch the whole panel. Like, again, I caught a piece of it. But basically, a queer platonic relationship is something that Arrow Ace people might engage in where it's not romantic or sexual in any way, but it is still a partnership. There is still, like, connection there. It's just not the way allosexual and allo-romantic people might think about that. And so in this game, there is a queer platonic relationship between a vampire and a human. So 2 things I thought that were very interesting about this is, first off, is like the Arrow Ace representation in games of which Anna was saying there wasn't a lot of it. But she had this one slide from the panel that I'm going to quote from. She's saying how to kind of make, Arrow Ace characters and representation kind of like approachable, and make it not so scary for players who don't understand. So she wrote here, don't make a big deal out of it. Arrow Ace players will see it. Allo people will be more likely to enjoy it as they won't feel lectured. Authenticity abounds. Turns out ace people are just people. What? Takeaway. If a character is asexual / aromantic or in a QPR, treat it as the most normal thing in the world because it is. And I love that. She was also talking about how this visual novel has QuickTime events. And so there's like one panel where she kind of shows some of the code. But basically, like, in some instances, like, when you're talking with someone, there are like in real life, I mean, when you're talking with someone, right? Like, you immediately, like, populate your brain with answers to what someone just said to you. And some of them are, like, impulsive, and some of them are, like, take a bit of time for you to process it and conjure up in your mind. And so the game kind of emulates that by having certain, in these QuickTime events, have, like, that impulsive answer show up, but, like, you have literally half a second to click it before it disappears. And other things take a couple seconds to show up. So as stressful as that sounds from a video game point of view, where like, hey, I'd actually like to say that answer because that's what I would say in real life. And maybe that's a thing that like, but it's really cool that like she's kind of emulating that in this game. So this game is on itch. She did say like, there's lots of bugs in the game. She said it with humor, but she also said it like, you know, like you're just going to come across bugs and that's just how it is. But I think it's super cool that, that this game exists and that someone who is Arrow Ace is making is doing her best to include Aries representation in games. Obviously, maybe that can't extend to stuff like The Legend of Zelda, but how much romance is there really in The Legend of Zelda games anyway? Even with Link and Zelda in Tears of the Kingdom, all that stuff is in the very far background. It is like heavily implied and not really confirmed. So, and again, you can find the link to that game down in the show notes as well. And so after that, it was like a partway through this panel with Anna that I basically had to go check into my hotel. And by the time I was checked into my hotel and everything else, day one was over. So at that point, I went and met a friend, and I went and got food, and I just kind of like decompressed because like it was quite a day. Day two. Let me just take a quick drink here. So day two began with the keynote speaker, Avery Alder. And Avery Alder comes from the TTRPG space. Her keynote focused on TTRPGs, obviously, but the essence of her ideas can basically be applied to any creative medium, including how I make this podcast. So she talked about playing your TTRPG in different settings, watching people play it, asking questions about how the format of your game, and the time it takes to play it can affect the players who are playing it or limit how they play. For example, she talked about a woman who had recently had a baby, who had a hard time flipping through the pages because she had her baby in one arm. And so she like just trying to flip through the rule book, and like she can't because she's got one hand to do so. She talks about how, like people got to go for pee breaks and like figuring out how to schedule that and how does that affect the flow of the game. She talked about how like you should play your game with people, but you should also just like sit back and literally watch people play. And she also talked about how like sometimes the table itself, like as a format, like sitting at a table can also be limiting on how you play, or it can change or affect how you play. And so basically what I kind of took away from this as someone who makes video and audio content is basically like, do your best to remove yourself from the creation process and sit back and think about and watch how people engage with the things that you make. And is it how you intended? Is how you intended good? And is it working? And stuff like that. So like, I just started applying it to like how it could affect the podcast, and like, probably won't see results immediately, but it did open my eyes. Like maybe I should like try different things to see how people engage with the podcast. I know the main piece of feedback I've gotten from people, which is admittedly not a ton of feedback, but is that I talk really fast. And I've just like always been like that. I've been told this my whole life, is that I talk fast. Sometimes it's because I'm impatient. Sometimes it's because I feel like I'm short on time. Sometimes I feel like it's because someone's about to cut me off. In the case of right now, I'm probably talking very fast because like it's late and, I have to get the podcast out and I have to go to work the next day and like all these other things. So like, just like critically thinking about the thing that you are making and how people are engaging with it, like in a physical, tactile manner too. Like, is this, like in the case of games, like, is this working for you? So, again, like I said, by the time day two came around, though, moving on from the keynote speaker, there was way too much happening for one person to experience everything on day two. Like there was like 3 or 4, I think, different things you could go do before you even consider the arcade. And so the first thing I went to do was to check to see where the arcade was. Because the arcade didn't open till after the first set of panels. But when I walked into the arcade, lo and behold, I ran into someone that I knew. So before I talk about all the games and all the people that I ran into, though, I just want to say my usual spiel about, respecting indie developers and things like that. So, all the games that I'm going to talk about today and that I have talked about today are made by small indie teams, sometimes just solo devs, that are real human beings like you or me, people you pass on the street, people you go to school with, people you work with, people you sit next to at the bar or you sit next to on your couch. And so if a game is supposed to be scheduled for a certain release date, or if a game is supposed to have a certain feature, or if a game is supposed to be a certain way, or you have certain expectations, all that stuff could change. All that, it might not even ever come out for all we know. Like, and that's it's not me rooting against the devs, but just remember to remember the human in all of this and be respectful. And these are not corporations where you can scream at them on social media like, hey, where is Pokemon Legends ZA release date, Game Freak? You shouldn't really do that to anybody, but especially small indie teams, solo devs that are just people, just make some of these people are just making this stuff in their spare time. I'm making this podcast in my spare time. Like, I have a day job. This is, I don't want to call it a hobby because I consider it a little bit more than a hobby because it's a passion project, but it is something that I do on the side. It is not any source of income for me. So anyway, just remember that, when you're engaging with content, when you're engaging with people, remember the human. In the words of Black Panther, basically, in terms of bullying people on the internet, we don't do that here. So, and this is also, I will say, another caveat here, is that this is not a comprehensive list of all the video games that were at QGCon this weekend. But I tried my best with the time I had to interact with the devs, play their demos, and get permission and set boundaries for interviews if we had an interview. And like I said, all games are linked in the show notes, either to itch or Steam. So like I said, I ran into someone that I knew, and it's someone who's been on the podcast before, and it was Rocket Adrift. So, Lindsay and Sloan from Rocket Adrift, were there. Titus was not. But if you go back to episode 21, and for context, also episode 20, where I talked about their games, but Rocket Adrift is the team behind Raptor Boyfriend at Psychroma. And this was also our first in-person meeting. I've only met them virtually and through emails and stuff like that. So this was really cool. As soon as I saw the big Psychroma banner, I made a beeline. I was like, oh, first off, I love Psychroma. I literally talk about it almost every episode. If you haven't played Psychroma yet, this is your weekly reminder to go play Psychroma. It is amazing. But I went and spoke to them. We caught up and, we just interacted. And, basically I went to the arcade well before. I got so engrossed in the conversation with them. I missed that first panel, of Saturday of day 2. But they did reveal to me something I can talk about on the podcast, that it's kind of officially out there, but not on the Steam page yet. But basically, Rocket Adrift is working on their next game. It's called Dead Finger Dice, a billionaire killing game. And it is due out for release on October 24th, which is less than a month away. Super excited for that. So I'm going to drink some water again. I've been going all weekend, like the Energizer Bunny. So this is the first time I'm sitting down and breathing, and I'm not really doing that. So, yeah. So again, like I said, October 24th, if something happens, maybe that release date doesn't get met. I'm not saying they will or they won't make it, but just remember that Rocket Adrift, they're human beings. Be nice. But yeah, so I'm super excited to play Dead Finger Dice. I know there's a demo out there. I haven't had time to play it, but I'm really looking forward to this because who doesn't want to play a billionaire killing game? Oh, did I say that out loud? So after Rocket Adrift and talking about Psychroma, talking about Dead Finger Dice, and just catching up, I actually left my Switch 2 with Sloan so she could play it, because I wasn't going to. I went to the table right beside Sloan and Lindsay, where this game intrigued me. It was called A Night for Flesh and Roses, and so at the table, first off, there was the laptop open with the demo page, and it had this nice red looking visual, this pinkish red visual with cut out letters making up the title. But also sitting beside the laptop was all these pins in some fabric, I guess. I don't know what word you would use, but basically, a whole bunch of body parts, anatomy parts, had been cut out of magazines and stuff like that, and books and text. I should say it's textbooks. It's actually explained in the interview that's coming up, but I don't want to spoil the joke. So, that I made. But anyway, I guess it's not really a joke. Anyway, I'm getting in the weeds here, but basically I was really intrigued by this because it wasn't just all these pieces put together in the shape of an actual human body. It was very distorted and out of place almost. Everything was kind of out of place, and that's kind of the point. So I'm just going to read here for you the itch description. A Night for Flesh and Roses is a visual novel where you find yourself in a strange organic body horror castle full of people who are as much of a weirdo as you are, or at least as weird as you will become. In this far future, augmenting and changing the body is so normalized that most look unrecognizable as human. In addition, the body is constantly in flux, allowing people to change their form at will, including you. Learn about this strange place while also having sensual tension with a cast of unfolded and inside-out monsters. I changed a word in there because I don't want YouTube to flag me. So if you hear sensual, it's replacing the other word, which I'm sure you can figure out. But that's the log line. But basically, yeah, the game starts you off. It took me about 45 minutes to play through, I think. It was roughly what it should be. I didn't time myself, but that's about roughly what it should take you to play through the whole game. But basically, you start off in a character creator. And it's not your typical character creator, though, because you're basically given the cutouts that were on the table are also in the game. And basically, you build yourself like a skinless body, basically, out of all the parts given to you. It's a very intense experience. So I'm glad it was a 45-minute experience. It's very intense and very, it's body horror, and it's body horror to a very intense degree. So, but at the same time, there were some light puzzle elements to it that I thought were really, really interesting. And I thought could work very well as part of a longer experience. And I did ask Elliot, the developer, if they were interested in, making a longer game. And it's definitely a possibility for sure. But basically the puzzle elements is like, you're trying to navigate your way through this like other dimension full of people who are like you, who've like reconstituted the way their body is. And so some areas like, you need to squeeze through this crevice. So you can't have anything except you can't have any bones basically. And so you've got to remove all the bones from your character. And at that point, I was like, well, okay, I'm looking at all these, the bones one was pretty easy, but then there's another one where you have to basically only be muscle. And at that point, I was like, well, I hope I remember my human anatomy, because I'm not sure what all these pieces are. Because once they're not with the spot where it says, these are muscles, these are bones, you're like, oh, I'm not sure which is which. And again, I didn't really not that I didn't pay attention to science class, I just wasn't very good at it. So it took me a little bit of finagling, but I did like that element of you have to figure out what the game is trying to tell you about how you navigate through this world. And there are accessibility options too, where you can basically go up to one of the characters and say can you just give me the answer? And while the character won't tell you specifically which parts to remove, they will say you should probably be all muscle if you want to pass through this section. Which is really cool, honestly. I spent a good hour talking with Elliot, the developer, and generally just connecting over queer experience and how that applies to games. It was just really cool. I basically had this kind of conversation with every developer there, where we just talked and got to know each other, and just how any other queer person has ever interacted with another queer person ever is you kind of skip all the small talk and you go straight to okay, so how do our experiences relate and differ? Anyway, I'm going to intro quickly. There was an interview here that I captured with Elliot. It's not too long. It does, though, have some background noise, obviously, because we were in a conference setting. There was crowds, there's background noise. Yeah, please listen to this. Please take a watch. Hi, True Avatars. I'm here with Elliot Rex White.
Hi.
Elliot Rex White is the developer of A Night for Flesh and Roses, which is an MFA thesis project.
Yes, for the University of California, Santa Cruz.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So for listeners and viewers, I'll do my best to kind of give you some context as we go along, but I've played the full game. It's a very short game. It's, you said it's about 45 minutes or so if you kind of do everything.
Yeah.
And it's basically a visual, actually I'll let you explain it. Can you just give me few sentence elevator pitch of what the game is about?
Yeah, so A Night for Flesh and Roses is a visual novel that is primarily about creating a new body out of lots of really strange pieces. The characters in the game are all these far future kind of transhumanist body modification weirdos that have turned themselves inside out and into different configurations for the purposes of self-expression. And so as the player, you're going into their space, which they call the Crucible, where you are changed into this thing. You get to create your character, move these pieces around and collage a new self together. And it's a reflection on transgender surgery, bodily autonomy, and rethinking the horror and disgust reaction that we have towards the body and towards surgery generally.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it. So I want to just ask a little bit about, so in the game, you can build your character from all these different body parts, which are skinless, but you have this physical, not so much interpretation, but these are the pieces you use to scan into the game to then build your character creator, correct?
Yes. So everything in the game, and this is one of the characters, it's a puppet that I made. It has a wire armature under it. So if I take this pin out, the arms do move. And I use that to create stop motion animations. I actually use this app that's called Stop Motion Studio, which is free, and it's on the App Store and the Play Store. And it's really cool if you want to get into stop motion. You just take repeated shots of whatever you want in the same sequence. You can set up the frame rate and all of that stuff. So I had a setup where I had these guys on green screen fabric and went through all their animation cycles, typically how you would for a character sprite in a game, but it was just a lot of actual photos. And then all these pieces are cut out of copies of Grey's Anatomy, which is a medical textbook.
Not the TV show.
Not the TV show. I've once pitched this game before saying you make characters out of Grey's Anatomy pieces, and they're like, how does that work? And they're thinking about the actors getting fused together. No, it's not that at all. This particular edition is illustrations by Henry Van Dyke Carter, who is an illustrator in the 1800s. So they're all illustrations of cadavers, but I like to say that you're giving them new life by recombining them and putting like living things together out of these like kind of artifacts or these kind of snapshots of corpses in a way that's very interesting to me. And I've also used the pieces to collage some of the backgrounds with other materials like ribbon and yarn and like painted backgrounds. So it's a mixture of a lot of collage techniques to make all the environments in the game.
So when I was playing the game, you described it as a visual novel, and when I got into the actual story, there was a lot of point and click elements.
Yes.
And also, like, to progress through the story, you have to rebuild your body as you go to kind of like figure out like, oh, well, the hint in the game, and I always went for the hints, thankfully that they were there, which is very accessible. I was always like, oh, how do I get through this, like, this pool of oil? And it was like, okay, you gotta, you know, and I won't spoil it, but you have to choose certain body parts to get through, and you gotta kind of have to figure it out. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and your inspiration behind that.
Yeah, I was thinking about ways in which to use the way that you have changed your body more mechanically. Part of that is reflecting on the ways that our own bodies interface with the world around us, how we might be able to get into certain spaces, literally and metaphorically, depending on how we've like configured our bodies. So in the case of my game, it's very literalized, where like, oh, if there are parts of your body that are not rigid, that you don't have bones, there's ways for you to fit and move into certain spaces better. And then when we think about how we operate as human beings in the real world, we're thinking about like how you present yourself and have put together your body determines what kind of spaces you have access to and where you can go and what can be seen as like acceptable or what is like normal in big quotation marks for the body to be in those places. So it's it originally stemmed from like, I want to find a way to take all the data that was encoded in all the body part pieces already and be like, can I use this for a mechanical purpose? Like, because I already have all this data of what a character has, what pieces are making up the character. I also used it in some like narrative elements, so a character might express that you're not very muscular because you don't have some of those muscle pieces that are on your character, and certain things like that that allow you to be read by other characters in the game in a way that is kind of alien and strange, but still similar to how our own bodies are read in a gendered way.
So I have a couple more questions for you. Admittedly, this one I might cut depending on YouTube's, if YouTube flags it. But I don't want to. But I don't want to. Maybe I'll use the word sensual instead of the other word for this, just to avoid any automated filters. But when you're playing through the game, there are characters who are interested in you sensually, and at first it's kind of, at least for me, and this is not a judgmental statement, more so just like you're looking at characters that look like this.
Yeah.
Which can be horrifying to some people. So there's a couple characters that show romantic or sensual interest in you as the player character, and the game cuts to a black screen, and I found it actually very erotic in a way. When these characters engage with you, even though it's just like I'm pressing my femur against your arm bone, for example, right? I was just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so when I was, and I will also try to parse my language down, but when I was thinking about these scenes, part of it, the vagueness comes from, I don't know necessarily both who is playing the game, like what their body is like, and I also only have a certain amount of data of what pieces they've used to create their characters. So there's certain things that I can describe being touched or interfacing with each other with these other characters, but a lot of it is that vagueness allows for a degree of destroying this normative idea of intimacy, and it's expanding it to mean a lot more different things, and that's very relatable to a lot of queer people. Of intimacy doesn't have to take, and it doesn't actually take one specific set of activities or one image. It's a very expansive thing that my game kind of takes to another extreme of like, oh, it can be even more expansive and include all these other parts of the body that we might not normally consider. It's also a way for me to play with the idea of how intimate surgery actually is. This idea of like, you have agreed to somebody going within your body and changing it in these ways, the amount of trust that you put on them and consent that is very similar to those kind of situations in more typical displays of intimacy. So I found it really interesting to play with this back and forth of like taking the language and softness and passion that is in more typical descriptions of intimacy, but then applying a very like surgical set of body parts or ways that you're reaching into the body in new kinds of ways.
So with all these interesting mechanics and concepts, I think as a bite-sized 45-minute experience, it works. But I think you have a lot of other interesting ideas here. I mentioned, when we were talking before, I mentioned it feels like the inverse version of quality dreams reasonably priced, which I'm sure my audience will know because I've talked about it before, but this is like the, not anti-version of it, but it's very inverted in a lot of ways, whereas quality dreams reasonably priced has this like dystopian future, but people are accepting of trans identities, whereas this game is like very grotesque, but there's still like transphobia despite these people who are changing their bodies in many ways.
Yeah.
But I'm curious because it's such a fleshed out, sorry for the pun, a concept. I was wondering if you had plans to kind of expand into a larger project.
I would really like to. This piece was made in RenPy, and like there are limitations to that engine that I might want to do future projects, but at least for now, I want to use different engines, thinking of different ways to go about it. I know that I really wanted to do something that is like kind of a little bit how we were talking about before, like something where you're able to do more of the physical manipulation that has motions similar to collaging. So the idea of actually unpeeling things, whether it's dragging and holding and like unveiling certain things about the body, things like that. I want to still play in the world that I made for this game because it's so like, there's a lot of lore in it that there's a little bit that you get in the actual game, but I have like a lore file for myself that's like, okay, it's the far future, almost all technology is replaced with like bioengineering. People just grow apartment buildings. You don't have a smartphone anymore, it's just like a weird like flesh watch thing. And there's all these different little things in this world that I'm like, oh, I want to like expand on that, because there's like these hints at a like wider future vision that, as someone who is really interested in sci-fi myself, I really want to keep pursuing what that looks like, and especially because this game, I was very insecure about my writing at first because it was something very different than I normally do, especially because of the more sensual elements to it. And when it's a game that has so much writing and so much of like my personal feelings in it, it's easy to get insecure about like, oh, how is this going to be seen or received? But it's been received basically entirely positively. Everyone really likes it.
It's fantastic.
A lot of people are really into it. Thank you. And it's made me a lot more confident in my like future as a writer of like, oh, I can keep like pushing at these ideas and do so really effectively. So I would like to expand on this like wacky little sci-fi world that I made in my brain. And whether it takes the same visual quality or not, I'm not sure, but I do really like the visual quality of it. So, and I have so many of the pieces still. I have so many cutouts. But yeah.
So I guess I have one final question for you. If you could just final thoughts or just like one thing you could say to like future players or just queer audiences in general, if you could tell them like one thing or even two things.
Yeah.
There's no limit on it. What would you say?
Yeah. I think with this game, I think the biggest takeaway that I want people to have is to approach bodies with an open mind and to not approach bodies relying on this first kind of what would it be called? Like snap instinct towards disgust or towards distaste, and consider things that are that might make you uncomfortable at first, or that might make you confused, or you're not quite understanding, you know, what you're seeing or what you're like experiencing, because like at the end of the day, when you're able to step back and when you're able to appreciate the multiple possibilities of the body, it allows you to be so much more kind and open-minded and like caring towards people, regardless of how your first impression of them might be, because of choices that they've made. So it's something that I mean, we joked earlier that you were like, oh, Turf should play this game because that could be really interesting. But so there's that element too of like, I want to shock people out of their instinct to just shut down when they're exposed to these ideas, and like see the kind of beauty that happens when you embrace them, and embrace ourselves and how we want to be seen. But
that's really sweet, and I like that. And I think what you're doing is like, it's very clear and very effective what you're doing, because even though I'm a very open-minded person, when I first sat down and I started hearing about your game and I started playing it, I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. I think this is a little too grotesque for me.
Yeah.
And then like I did find the sensual stuff very titillating. I found the story very compelling and the gameplay very interesting. And by the time it ended, I was like, oh no, it's over.
Yeah.
It's like, there's got to be more. I want more. So I think hopefully the way it resonated with me, it will resonate with more people, and your message will get across as well.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for this. And is it available now to play, or can it be wishlisted?
Yes, so it is on my itch.io page, which is necropocene / and then it'll be A Night for Flesh and Roses. But you can post the link to it in the description.
Yeah. Can I show a shot of your business card?
Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. So I'll put this down here as well. And you can also find that in the show notes, listeners, but I'll just put that there so anyone watching in the moment can see. But yeah, no, thank you so much for your time and for the chance to try out your game. It's wonderful and amazing. And if there ever is a fuller version of this, an expanded version, please don't hesitate to tell me, because I will be there day one.
For sure. I love talking about this game, and it has, despite it, like some of its bugginess and some of its like stuff in my brain would love to be more polished, I'm still very happy with how it turned out. So I always love exposing it to people. Yeah.
No, it's beautiful and grotesque, and I went into this going, I'm not sure, but I'll try. And then I walked away being like, oh no, it's over. So like, and I know I said that before, but yeah, no, I think you did your job very well.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you as well.
Okay, so the next game that I got to play was Love in the Time of Spellphage. And this comes from Studio Witchcraft, which is, by the way, Witchcraft is spelled with no vowels. The Studio Witchcraft was created and the game was developed by a queer couple who were both there. And the description from the QGCon website reads as follows. Explore the neighborhood of Crowhurst, a tabletop role-playing inspired world of elves, goblins, and magic in its late 1980s. When the Spellphage begins under mysterious circumstances, causing those who are infected to lose their ability to use magic forever, Lauren must choose Pardon me. Lauren must choose whether to retreat into comfortable hobbies or do what she can to uncover the mysteries of her world. With its branching magic and dynamic narrative structure, there are no wrong choices, but no two playthroughs will be exactly alike. So, first off, this game was inspired by the pandemic. It takes place in a fictional version of Montreal. But what I liked about this is because this demo had 3 short paths you could play through. It was very conscious of the fact that we were in like a setting where you were only playing games for like 5-10 minutes at a time, so you could go play other games. However, I couldn't just pick one of the 3 paths. I did play 2 of them. The game had very beautiful art and very natural dialogue, but I especially liked the characters. They felt very real, but also had very distinct personalities. So one character, Lauren, who is mentioned in the description, she felt uncomfortable with another character and had this very polite but very insistent demeanor wherein she wanted to get information from someone in a position who was in a position of authority over her. I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but she kind of said, like, I know I shouldn't be rude and intrude on your personal space, but you are making me uncomfortable and I deserve to know why your actions are causing this. Which is like something I would never say or do in real life. When someone in a position of authority over me is like making me uncomfortable, generally I'm like, oh, maybe I should be uncomfortable. And so I just love that this character was so defiant and like still respectful, but also in like I'm going to be respectful as I can, but also you have to meet me halfway here and tell me why I'm uncomfortable, why you are doing the thing that is making me uncomfortable. The other part of the demo that I played was basically a car ride between Lauren and her friend Dustin, a goblin, in which Dustin, who's basically her weed dealer, opens up and reveals he's transgender, and Lauren has this internal monologue. The kind of internal monologue that you have in real life, but you never see or hear in any kind of media ever, where she realizes he's trans because she never knew before. And she's kind of like processing like, oh, do I make a big deal out of this? Do I ask about this? Do I ask what this means? Oh, this person must really trust me if he's opening up to me and trusting me with this information. So I could say a lot more about this game, but I did interview the lead artist from Studio Witchcraft who made Love in the Time of Spellphage. So I'm going to drop that interview in right now. And again, just be mindful of the audio quality. Hi, True Avatars. I'm here with Kylie Chimesco, developer of, and you're the lead artist on Love in the Time of Spellphage.
Yes.
I got that right? Okay, cool. So we're here at QGCon. This is the first time I'm doing one interview, so if there's any technical difficulties or anything weird, I'm sorry about that to my audience. But anyway, yeah, I just want to ask you about your visual novel, which is currently in development, and you're getting ready to release it. Is that correct?
Yes, we're getting ready to release it on Steam in early 2026.
Amazing. Okay, so just for audiences, can you give like the elevator pitch on what your game is about?
Yeah, so we're kind of calling it spell punk, D&D inspired, wizard, magical school love story.
Love that. Yeah, sorry.
I was like, elevator pitch, trying to keep it short.
Yeah, you can talk longer if you want.
Yeah, you play as Lauren, a graduate student going to Crowstone University, but they've all happened to have been hit with a magical pandemic called the Spellphage. This is very much inspired by, obviously, the pandemic that has hit our world. We wanted to kind of tell a story that was influenced by mine and my wife's love story, so it also happened during the pandemic, so we're dealing with like themes of isolation, of lower energy, of trying to figure out who you are during kind of like this big crisis that's happening.
That's fair. So I did get to play a little bit of the demo here. Thankfully, some demos here are full builds. Like they're not demos, but they're here for demonstrations. But this game was specifically very bite-sized. Like you start off the demo with like you don't have time to play the full game. So here's a little window into it. And you said what I played were like bits of the endings, like the various ending paths, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So the first one I played is the explosion path. Mm-hmm. And there's this wonderful scene where Lauren confronts Kim about the source of the explosion because the explosion happened in Kim's room. And so Lauren is very demanding in a very respectful way. And I wanted to ask you, because Lauren is basically saying things like, I want answers, but like, and very, very forwardly asking for these answers, but also respecting that, like, I understand I'm breaching a boundary here, but also you breached my boundary. And sorry, watchers, I'm not holding this camera very well, and I apologize for that. But basically my question is are Lauren and Kim extensions of you and your wife, and is this how you spoke to each other in your first meetings?
They're not. They were pulled more from kind of some classic tropes. We wanted to play a little with like tropes and stereotypes that are kind of going on with some of our characters and following character design. So the Kim Lauren dynamic is kind of like the older mentee who's like, maybe you're attracted to her, maybe she's attracted to you, but there's like a vibe between us, but she has power over you. She works as a TA at your school. She officiated one of your exams. So like there's a history there, and so you're trying to figure out and navigate those boundaries because like you live in the same building. She's doing something weird. She obviously has secrets. So you're trying to learn more for your safety, but also because you're like, hey, is everything okay with Kim?
Yeah, I really liked that interaction because it's something, the way Lauren was speaking to someone who had power over her is definitely something I would never do to like someone in a position of power over me. Like I'm too scared to do that. So it was like getting a window into like how to properly breach someone's boundary without, like you're overstepping but not enough to like upset someone.
Right.
Like anyway, I just really liked that about it. And I was wondering if like that, I guess what I'm also asking is like, does that reflect any personality traits of anyone on the dev team? Or if this is just like a character creation that something you would never do, but your characters do.
I think like when it comes to Lauren's side, it's like I'm someone who's like, you know, you go to therapy and you're like, oh, I need to learn to have boundaries, and I need to start understanding what it means to have the boundaries and have hard conversations. And this was supposed to be a moment for Lauren where the first time she meets Kim, she's like, oh, I don't think I should engage with her. I don't know, this is like my place. And then it's kind of Lauren's moment of realization of like, hey, I can do something here and I should do something here. So it's kind of like her trying to understand her own control and power in a situation and when to step up.
And so you also mentioned that the game is based on, not only is it based on the pandemic, but you said it's like it's based on and set in like a fantastical-ish Montreal.
Yes, exactly. We really wanted to like ground it in the world we knew, where our relationship developed, and like pull from the things that we see in our everyday.
So speaking of the everyday, so for context for listeners, I'm sure I talked about this in the segment I'm going to record much later when I get home. But for the first day of the QGCon experience of the conference, there was a talk from Chris Schroyer, who made a game called 3 Days to Chicago. And Chris was talking about I believe Chris's pronouns are he, him, if I'm remembering correctly. And if not, I apologize for that now. But he was talking about how a lot of visual novels are much more focused on like your typical fantasy or your typical sci-fi, like things that are not attainable is the word he used. And so he talked about attainable fantasy, like everyday goals that you can actually achieve. Like I think one example he might have even given was like going to get groceries or something like that. Like, and so when I was playing your game, it's like this D&D-esque version of Montreal, but like all the characters' problems are just like everyday problems. Like there's magical elements to it, but like for the most part, people just want to transition and live their life and like get through the pandemic so they can see their family, friends, loved ones again. But yeah, I wanted to talk to you like about how apt, I guess, I don't really have a question, just a vague comment, and maybe you can speak to more about the bridge between like fantasy and attainable fantasy in your game.
Yeah, it's like it was interesting listening to that talk and like having the term attainable fantasy, because we'd never heard it before either. I think maybe Chris has come up with it. It sounds really cool.
Yeah.
But I think it also kind of relates a lot to kind of a classic, more Japanese style of like the slice of life anime, where it's just like you are dealing with kind of mundane things, but that's still your life. These are still just the regular ways we live, and it still causes problems and drama, and there's things there. So we wanted to have these slice of life elements while still in a fantastical world where, hey, anything could happen, but hey, yeah, you still gotta pay your rent and you still gotta go to school. How are you gonna submit your homework? You can do it magically, but we really wanted to kind of keep it in a realm of relatableness, kind of.
Yeah, I love that. I think it reminded me actually, so also here, some listeners and viewers will know that I previously interviewed Rocket Adrift, who made Psychroma and Raptor Boyfriend. Raptor Boyfriend was a very similar kind of game where it's like you're in this small Ontario town and you're just kind of vibing, you're just trying to get through your last year of high school. But the fantastical element is that like everyone is like a mythical creature, like Bigfoot or a raptor, right? Hence the name Raptor Boyfriend. And so I did see some similarities there. I guess if you could speak to your potential audience for this game, if you wanted them to know like one thing about your game, what would you tell them?
Oh, wow.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. Just sell it all. I guess I like to pitch it as if you loved Harry Potter and you want to reclaim magical schools, if you want to have characters who are a little more grown up and a little more your age, kind of like the new mid-adult, new adult kind of area. Like, this is a story I think that would be relatable to you, enjoyable to you, if you want to experience some similar things, but with a hint of magic and a hint of distance, if you're ready to deal with a pandemic setting again.
That's fair. That's wonderful. Definitely some like things to weigh there. Like, do you want to experience, because we all just got over the pandemic, so it is maybe tough for some to swallow. But you actually did remind me of one more question I wanted to ask. That was meant to be the last one, but I have one more question for you, and that's there's when you're speaking to Kim, there's a lot of I want to say technical mumbo jumbo, but it's a lot of like magical mumbo jumbo. And I wanted to know, because you said it was partially based in stuff like Dungeons and Dragons, and does all that stuff that Kim's explaining about, like I think she says something about portals and like
the ether
and all that stuff, is there like a logic of that in your game, or is it all just like
there's like an undercurrent where a little bit of those hints come into play of like, hey, like, why do these people have internet and computers, and why can some people use it in their cars? And it's just like, oh, there's magic, there's ether, there's portals. So there's kind of this world building we've done around that, and Kim's scene is very much the exploratory lore building time where you get to learn a little bit more about that, but it's things we'd love to cover in Act 2, which we'll do if we get enough wish lists on Steam.
Yes, please wish list this game. Go support queer games at all times. But also, because these are indie games, I want to remind my viewers and my listeners that like indie games, they take time, and even if there's a set release date anywhere on Steam or on the internet, devs might not make that release date, and we have to respect that and not pester them, because they are not EA, they are not Nintendo, they are just people like you and me. Anyway, sorry.
No, all good. Yeah, it's a good reminder. Yeah.
Well, anyway, I guess anything final you want to say before we close out?
Play games, play indie games, play queer games.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me.
No, thanks for having me.
So, this next game that I want to talk about, I'm only going to talk about briefly, because if I talked about it in any detail, I'm pretty sure I would get flagged off YouTube and my podcast host, so I'm not going to, but I am going to put the information about this game, including its title, down in the show notes. But basically, this was the Dilation game. It was made by game dev Brooke, whose pronouns are she/pup, and Pup was actually at the hotel room. I think it might have been Pup's hotel room, actually. But anyway, when I was, kind of like looking for a place between the Airbnb and the hotel, and I was invited to the hotel, Brooke was the person who came down to get me, and was very welcoming and kind, and complimented me on my nails, which are starting to fall apart. But yeah, so for audio listeners, I did hold up my nails here. They're like a nice, like kind of a cerulean blue, which I had done actually a few weeks ago in the hopes that I could have it done both for a date and for the conference. The date was canceled, unfortunately, and he has not rescheduled, so I don't know. But anyway, it was nice to get compliments on my nails, because the reason I got them done kind of fell through. But anyway, I do recommend checking out Brooke's game down in the show notes. It's very interesting and strange, but basically it's a game about dilating post-op, and that's all I'll say about that, because again, any more words on this and I will get taken down, or at least censored, or put into like the adult category, unfortunately. Next up was a game called Queen Boat. It's a short but heart-wrenching game from Ahmed Khalifa, which was a 2D linear visual novel of sorts, with early Atari, or I guess NES style visuals. And this game was kind of a mix, like a hybrid of the developer's experiences in Egypt as a gay man, and also the Egyptian government's treatment of gay men, particularly, I think in 2001, when the police raided a gay club set on a boat and jailed 52 men and beat them in prison. Anyway, so I'll just let the summary speak for itself here. From the QGCon website, an LGBT story based on personal experiences and a famous LGBT incident called the Queen Boat Incident, or Cairo 52, that happened in Egypt in 2001. The game looks from the perspective of one of the people who was arrested during the events. It talks about stigma, fear, and loneliness that could push any young person towards hating themselves and sometimes to suicide. The game is about raising awareness about LGBT life in Egypt and showing that our work as a community is not finished. There's a lot of work to be done to make sure the world is a safe place for everyone. I should have trigger warning. I added a trigger warning for suicide. I'll add that down in the show notes, but there isn't too much conversation in the game about that I recall. But it was a very overwhelming but short game. It took me about 10 minutes to play through the whole thing, and there are some very light puzzle elements. But basically, the puzzle elements, which I thought were very interesting, are basically like the character whose back is to you, the player character, is looking at other faceless people, across the screen, and like sometimes there'll be like 3 or 4 characters on screen, and you'll have to like click on one of them to get that person's story and interaction with the player character. And you kind of have to keep clicking on that character to keep getting bits and pieces of the story. But you could also go back and forth between other characters as well. And then when like each character was finished, they would become grayed out. And none of the characters like had faces, including the developer stand-in, again, whose back was to the camera, quote unquote, as if we were watching from his perspective. So this seemed intentional, because many parts of the experience were conveying loneliness as the main character tried to find love and respect from a romantic partner, but only found pain and rejection. So when the conversation ended, the character would become grayed out because the character ultimately could not get any kind of emotional or sometimes even like they would just ghost this person. And again, I'm trying to use words here that don't get me flagged off YouTube. But at the end, though, of this demo, this was the full game, I was on the verge of tears, and I probably would have been had I already not been overstimulated from like a long day of many interactions, which happens to me at all conventions, all conferences, anything that's just a lot of human interaction for me. I just like halfway through the day, I'm like overstimulated. Things become numb. I feel a little bit lightheaded. It almost feels like I do what like I feel when I'm drunk, but I wasn't drunk. Like I hadn't had a single drop of alcohol in a long time before the conference or at the conference. So, but Ahmed offered Egyptian candies for all players who finished the game in the hope that it would lighten their spirits after a very dark experience and just kind of like be a palate cleanse. However, I did interview Ahmed, and I'm going to drop that interview here. And again, just be mindful of the audio quality. Hi, True Avatars. I'm here with Ahmed Khalifa. He has made a game called Queen Boat, which is about an Egyptian tragedy. And I wanted you put it in better words than I have because I just learned about it. But can you explain what your game is about and what it's based on?
Okay, so the game is based on a very famous incident in Egypt, and it was famous around the same time in the LGBT community, also around Europe mainly. And the main thing is in 2001, there was a political rivalry between Mubarak's sons and a political opposition. And then in order to stop this rivalry, they want him to stop. They just jailed a lot of LGBT people because the son of the rivalry was a gay person, and this was the main thing. And because of that, tons of people's lives were ruined, and just because it's just political problems that was happening. And this game is telling that story, but at the same time, I wanted also to tell myself in it, because when this happened, I was 12. I was not like old enough, and they were talking about it in the media as devil worshippers and other stuff. They were never referring to them as they're gays, they were terrorists, devil worshippers, stuff like that. So when I learned more about it, it was like, and I knew some people actually that went through it, or knew people that went through it. It was like really depressing, and I wanted to also put myself in that story somehow, because I want to express through my games a lot about myself. So it goes through the main incident that was happening, but also one of the characters that you're playing with is me from the background in it. So.
Okay. Well, it's a beautiful, heart-wrenching, heartbreaking, amazing game. It's very short. I'm curious, do you have plans to expand what I just played into something larger, or is it just meant to be a little bite-sized story?
So for this one, I think it's going to be a bite-sized story. I'm not going to expand on it, because even working on that game, it took me more than 6 to 8 months to work on it, although it could have been done in 2-3 months. But it was just whenever I was working on it, I was getting depressed a little bit, and then I just shut it down and start again. So I'm glad it's done, because it was like too much for me. So I'm not looking to expand it itself, but there's a lot of other stories that still in my mind that's around other stuff that happened either in my life or other people's life in Egypt or different areas that I think it might be better to do them than just like trying to expand on the same one.
And so I'm curious because your story could be told in a variety of different mediums. Like what drew you to game development and making it as a video game?
Sorry?
What drew you to telling your story in the video game format?
Mainly because I like games and I love to I cannot express myself well in writing. Like to do this writing, I had 2 other people go with me to fix the writing. For me, I usually express myself through systems and interactions. It's the only way that I can express myself really well. even most of my other games are not as much narrative, as much as mechanical based, and the mechanics might have a meaning to them. So, and I wanted also this game to give also, like, for it as this games media is to give you, like, even if you look like you have choices inside the game have one ending. You cannot control anything. You'll end up. So it felt like even from game mechanic, I'm removing all the options from you because you'll end up anyway in the same tragedy and the same ending. So it felt like it worked better. And also a lot of the people that are in the games community does not know about it compared to people. I know like friends from literature and stuff like that, they know a lot about it because of the books that publish about it. But like a lot of the games community, especially queer ones, don't know. So I was like, it's a good also space to raise awareness about what's happening in the LGBT community in Egypt and other places that's still struggling with some of the problems.
Okay. I guess if you could tell audiences one thing about your game, anything you wanted to tell them, what would you say?
The first thing is trigger warning. If you have any issues with your life about like self-harm, all of that, this game might be a little bit triggering. But the main thing is, and the other thing I want to say is like stuff will get better eventually, because even this is happening in 2001 and a lot of bad stuff has started still happening in Egypt, but like overall, if someone look at the arc of like people getting a little bit more free and stuff like that, this is better for the LGBT community. So it's gonna get better. So that's what I'm gonna say. Yeah. Even if the game doesn't show that, but it's eventually will get better.
Well, it only took me 5 minutes to play, but it broke me down a lot.
I know, it's not easy.
But I loved it. It's very beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I don't really have anything else to say other than like, I'm sorry.
It's fine.
But yeah, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to your future stories in this format.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for interviewing me.
Next up was less of a game and more of like an interactive like installation / experience, but the game was called, the experience was called Fundamental and Incontrovertible Reality. And it's an interactive installation with a bunch of stylized 2D homogeneous blue and pink people, kind of representing the cis heteronormative masses. And you as the player can select one of these like little characters on screen and randomize their appearance. You can change their eyes individually, so you can give them 2 different eyes. You can change their nose / mouth. I think those were combined. Their torso and each of their legs individually. So again, you can give them 2 different legs. Like you make a skinny long leg and a short, like a wider long leg. I think there were other options too, but I didn't cycle too far through the legs, but I did create a couple different characters and I cycled through a bunch of the options. I don't think I ever actually saw the same options twice, cycling through everything. So I thought that was pretty cool. And you could also mix and match the blue and pink coloring on a single person. I am gonna, like, if you're watching the video version, there is a visual demonstration of what I'm talking about on screen right now. If you're listening to the audio version and you feel like you're interested in checking that out, that is available to you. But after you change their appearance, you put your little character back into the crowd on the public screen, which is projected on the wall behind the developer, and you can see them walk around, basically adding queerness to a cis heteronormative society. Funnily enough, actually, and according to the dev, this was not programmed and it's entirely coincidental, but all the modified or queer characters were congregating in the same area on the screen, which looked like they created their own little queer community, which was both adorable and kind of uncanny, if I'm being honest. It was almost like, it was just strange. Like, it was kind of beautiful and weird. And anyway, I did get an interview with this developer as well. So again, be mindful of the audio quality, but it's going to be right here. Hi, True Avatars. I'm here with Chelsea Burtis, the developer behind the game you can see behind us here. It's more of an installation than a game, but this is a queer video game podcast, and this is very much queer, interactive experience. Chelsea, can you just tell me what your exhibit is called, and just a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's called Fundamental and Incontrovertible Reality. I can't say it because it's pulled directly from the U.S. government's recent order trying to dictate gender. So I made this piece kind of as a reactionary way of catharsis. So the piece starts with the governments fantasize two genders of a cis man who only presents masculinely and a cis woman who only presents feminine. But we, as like a collective group, can now go into this crowd and customize the people to express ourselves in our actual fundamental and incontrovertible way. So it's kind of this like group celebratory piece of the various ways of self-expression.
So how have people been responding to this exhibit today?
People get so excited to like make their little person, and then I just had a person that like tried to like come check in on their little guy that they made and stuff. Yeah, so it's fun to see, like everyone gets so connected with the little weirdo that they're making.
Yeah, just a weird little guy.
Yeah.
We were just talking before we started recording that we all noticed, and the person before here that was here noticed that they're kind of all congregating in one spot as if they're making their own little gay village. Did you plan that?
No, this is like my playtest day too, where I'm like finding out the little bugs. So apparently a little bug is once we make our little guys, they're all like forming a little community on there.
As you can see, someone is currently designing their own little guy too. I'm curious, what are your future plans for this piece?
I'm hoping mainly just to like present it at more like group settings, because it's kind of this awkward thing where it's not really a piece for like specific individuals to play. It's more like to make this like collective like celebration like with the community. So trying to find more conferences probably to have it at.
For sure, yeah. Well, if you're ever, obviously True Avatars, if you see this at an exhibit or a con or a conference, to check it out. But hopefully maybe one day you could come. I'm from Toronto. Hopefully one day you could come here and show. I think a lot of people from Toronto would love this too. And I guess I'll follow this up with just like if there was anything you wanted to say to anyone who might see this podcast or find your experience out in the world, like what would you say to them?
I mean, I just want, the reason I make stuff is just like my own way of expressing myself and expressing joy. So I hope anyone that does experience my games or is working with them is like doing it as a way to like serve themselves. And if you want to look at more of my stuff, I go under the name Bakiara, and I have a few games listed on itch.io.
Amazing. Actually, so I'll follow up. There's been a debate on the podcast about the pronunciation. This is not related to your game so much, and I apologize. itch.io versus itch.io. One friend of mine called me a fed for saying itch.io.
Oh, really?
But you're the first person at the conference today to say itch.io. Everyone else was saying io, and I felt vindicated until then. So sometimes
I get self-conscious that I just say itch.io. But I say
I'm not judging, to be clear. I'm not trying to embarrass you right now. I think this is just going to be the ongoing debate about how to say it, right?
That's the end question for every.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll keep this at the end because in case we want to cut it if it gets too political. But I'm curious about your take on what's happening with the U.S. government right now.
Well, it's just all complete bullshit. It's trying to dictate things that aren't actually important for like the government setting. Like the government should be to serve people and help people, and instead it's just like restricting people over like things that shouldn't be of consequence to others. How I exist in the world, if it's not harming others, like that shouldn't be a thing that should be restricted. Yeah.
I love that. You're right. If it's not hurting other people, and queer people aren't hurting other people, despite what some people online might have you say, that we're going into women's bathrooms and being, this is the scary trans person your mom warned you about. I mean, me here. I'm not.
I'm scared. These ones are scary.
Yeah, like they're just little blobs. I mean, they look how I feel. I'm just like a blob making my way through like a flesh.
Why do you hate this? Why are you mad at this?
Anyway, well, thank you so much for being on the podcast and this little interview.
Yeah, thanks for looking at my game and being interested in it and doing this.
Yeah. If people want to find you online, where can they find you?
Yeah. So I technically have an Instagram that I have made for my art stuff, but I don't keep it updated, but it's under my name, Chelsea Burtis. And Burtis is Brtis. It's weird. And then, like I said, my itch.io is Bakiara, so Bakiara.
And that's itch.io for any feds out there. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
This next game was the last game I got to try, and it was the game that, when I saw it on the QGCon website, I was very excited because I saw this game back in episode 40, when I covered it in episode 40, actually, when I saw it in the Press Gay to Play showcase, which you should definitely go back and listen to that episode if you haven't. There's lots of amazing games I talked about, but heads up that this episode is audio only as it predates the recent addition of the video version to the podcast. But when I saw that this game was at QGCon, I got really excited because I was really excited when I found out about it from the showcase. So this game is called Band Together, and it's not band as in like a musical band, but like band books band together. It's kind of a pun. But the QGCon summary reads as follows. A queer mystery game about book banning. Play as Ruby, they, them, a journalism major on a surreal after-hours adventure to investigate the disappearance of books from their college library. So the developer is Unquiet Games, and both Alanabel Bogdan and Nat, I'm not going to pronounce this correctly probably, I should have double-checked the pronunciation, but I did not remember to, Nat Maynard, they were both at the convention, at the conference, and I had lovely conversations with both of them, both together and separately. They were both sweet and very amazing to talk to. And they also let me ramble, which was super nice. They definitely didn't have to do that because, again, it was about, I always try to make sure that it's about the games and the developers and not me so much. But I also want to make sure that, like, when I'm pitching my podcast and the possibility of interviews or the possibility of just coverage, that, like, I want to make sure that, like, people know it's, like, a safe space and, like, I won't cross any boundaries that people don't want me to cross. And like, if boundaries are crossed or if boundaries change in the middle of something, like I want people to know that's okay. But basically there was a Band Together demo at the conference. And you should have seen the speed with which I booked my ticket when I knew there was going to be a demo at QGCon, because like I was already sold, but like as soon as I saw Band Together, it's like, yeah, I am definitely going. So the demo itself was super interesting. It's basically a point and click adventure game that felt kind of like a Zelda game because there's like a very intense puzzle element to the game. Basically, the gameplay is based around investigating objects and checking your journal, which records Ruby's thoughts and deductions as they're like learning things about the environment and finding clues. But basically, you're given a red heart sticker to paste in the notebook next to each paragraph of text, which will then change Ruby's internal thoughts that are displayed in the overworld, allowing you to interact with the world in different ways and decipher the next part and progress forward. Like finding a secret passage in the demo is one goal. Like you've entered the library and you're trying to kind of find your way in because everything's locked, but you find out there's a secret passage somewhere to get into the rest of the library. But there's a secondary goal about some books on the shelf that open the secret passageway. And to gather all the information to get through the secret passage, you kind of have to switch the heart sticker between each objective to find out everything you need to know. My description sounds a little bit complicated, and I promise I'm not trying to make this game sound convoluted, because it definitely isn't. It was very straightforward in practice, very simple, and it does allow the puzzle elements to shine through as their own challenge. And so I was just kind of like piecing my way through everything, because I had the devs with me, but I tried not to ask them for the answers, because I was like, I want to figure this out. And sometimes I felt so stumped, but when I figured something out, I felt very smart. The game makes you, like any good puzzle game, it makes you feel, excuse me again, I'm so sorry, I'm going to drink some water, but it makes you feel smart. I'm definitely not smart, but it made me feel smart. Okay. Something else that was really cool was when I was interacting with the books to engage with the, in the demo, to engage with the secret passageway, I noticed that all the other books in the library in this one room you could click on them. And so in this room alone, there were over 100 public domain books. So like I opened one book and it was Dracula. And I started clicking through. I was like, oh, cool. It's the first couple pages of Dracula. Like, I'm going to click through and see. I always click through any book in a video game, especially like Life is Strange. Like, you can click through and like, usually there's only like a couple pages and then you move on. Well, I kept clicking through and I kept finding more pages of Dracula. And I immediately looked at the devs and I said, like, is the whole book in the game? And they told me that, like, there's tons of public domain books that are all in the game and fully readable from start to finish, which is like, strange and weird and awesome. Like every book on the shelf can be selected, opened, and read from start to finish. And I just thought that was amazing. Like, I think that's really cool, because usually you throw in a couple pages, or you make like, in film we call this Greeking, where you make like a fake brand or a fake book that doesn't really exist. And maybe you write like the first couple pages, or you design like a logo or something, and then it's just there to kind of be like part of the set dressing. And no, they didn't just make set dressing. They included like hundreds of like books, like public domain books that you can like read through. Something that did occur while I was playing the game was the devs were watching over my shoulder. Whenever anyone's watching me do anything, I am a little uneasy. Because I'm self-conscious. I'm like, oh, what if I'm doing something wrong? What if I look silly? But I also agreed. They asked, like, they didn't like just watch over my shoulder. They asked me if it was okay. And I said yes, because despite being a little uncomfortable, I also knew that any kind of feedback or play testing is worth its weight in gold. As someone who gets feedback on her podcast sometimes, like when I do learn something, I'm like, oh, I'm good to know, like, this is working or this isn't working. Like, I'll change that for next episode, or I'll work on this, or, you know, I'll try to implement this. Like, one piece of feedback I did actually get this weekend from a fan that I met was that, his favorite part of the podcast is the what I've been playing segments, or the what we've been playing if I'm on with a guest. And so my thought is like, I want to find a way to make sure there's more time in an episode to talk about what we've been playing. So, anyway, all that is to say is that when the devs wanted to watch me play, they wanted play testing. And so it was fun to kind of like engage with them as they were watching me play. I was like, oh, you know, what's this for? And I wasn't trying to ask them for answers to the puzzles, but just like engaging in the game design and stuff like that. And they said like, it was very interesting watching me work out in real time how to solve the puzzles. So again, that's why I agreed to that. And I think it was worth it, because I think, like, again, feedback worth its weight in gold. Maybe they're not ready for proper playtesting yet, but again, with people being there for the demo and playing it, I knew it was important to them. Again, and if I had a question, like, I could literally just ask them. So I thought that was really cool. And I didn't have to give context when I asked them a question, because they were watching me play. So if I was like, hey, like, what's this? Like, I actually, at one point, got stuck walking up some stairs. Like, it wouldn't let me progress. It was a bug. Bugs happen. I'm sure it will not be there in the final game. But, you know, I was able to engage with the devs and like, hey, like, did I hit like an invisible wall? Like, is this where the demo ends? Like, what's going on here? And I was able to deduce that with a bug. Whereas, like, if I'm playing a demo on Steam through like the Steam Nexus, for example, I don't have the devs there to like say like, hey, I'm not sure if this is intentional or not. Right. So, one thing I want to say about this game, though, is that because it's about banned books, it is an important conversation about the state of censorship that's been building for years, particularly in the US, although in Canada we're also having some issues with banned books as well. But now this banned book stuff is also seeping into other things like the Steam censorship and the payment processor stuff. So I think this game is going to be very important and very relevant as we move forward in time. Now, I really wanted to get an interview with the devs, and I didn't get an on-the-fly interview at the conference. But without saying too much or jinxing anything or creating false expectations, I just want to say stay tuned. Stay tuned. And those are all the games that I had time to play. Sadly, I'm like really sorry to any dev that maybe wanted, like, I spoke to, but I didn't get to try their game. I really had planned when I entered the arcade to try to go to every single game demo, even if I didn't get to interview every dev. But my goal was like, I would love to get a 5-minute, play every demo and get a 5-minute interview with every dev here and put them in this episode. That was not possible, because as soon as I sat down with a developer, we started having these wholesome, in-depth conversations that were amazing, and I didn't want to cut anyone off. I was like really into it. And so if I had gone back for day 3, I probably would have continued engaging with other developers, and this podcast episode would probably be like 4 hours. Not that I'm complaining. I would definitely release a 4-hour episode on content like this, but sadly, I just did not have time to play everything. If you're a developer that was at the conference and you would like me to play your game, play your demo, or talk about it on the podcast, or even have an interview, please reach out to me. If you didn't get my card, it's okay. You can reach out through any of the social media platforms. DMs are open on all of those. The email is trueavatars.podcast@gmail.com. There's also a form on the website you can fill out to email me that people have used. I've tested it. It works. I've had content requests through it. So if any way you can find to reach out to me, or even on the Discord, that's for QGCon. Like, if you paid to go to the conference, you get access to the Discord. Reach out to me through the Discord. I'm Wild Zoe appeared there. Yeah, just like reach out. It's cool. And if you don't want to, obviously that's cool too. But at a certain point too, like, even if I'd wanted to play more games and had time, like I might have been like so overstimulated. Like at one point I just had to say to myself, like, hold on, partner, I'm overstimulated, like the meme. And my brain basically became mush. I felt a little bit drunk. I wasn't drunk, to be clear, but it feels very similar. I feel very dizzy and lightheaded, and I feel like I can't process all my thoughts. The last thing I'll talk about specifically was there was a person selling physical copies of indie games, and tons of them were queer. And so I like to collect physical games. I'm sure you can see on the shelf behind me, there's movies and games there. So I had to pick up games, a couple of games that were there. And so these were basically cassette cases with USB sticks in them and like art inserted into them. So if you're watching on YouTube here, if you're listening on the podcast, obviously you have to come to YouTube to see this, but I am holding up 2 games here that I picked up. One of them is called Luca, Born of a Dream, and the other one is called Slasher U, which is an 18+ horror movie dating sim, which is right up my alley. And Luca, Born of a Dream is a 2D top-down hack and slash with a very fluorescent art style, I would describe it as. Super not sanitized art style, I'll say. And I don't mean that in like a negative way. It's just like, it's not like a very polished looking game in the sense that like it looks intentionally unpolished. It otherwise does look polished as its own cohesive vision. But anyway, I did pick up these. You can see behind here, there's like USB sticks. If you're watching the video version, there's USB sticks inside, taped to some Velcro, so you can just take them out. And I assume these are the DRM-free versions. I think I missed when that was described to me, but I think they're DRM-free versions from itch. And again, these also were completely sanctioned and allowed by the developers. They get a cut of these games as well. So I had to pick up a couple, and I had to stop myself from buying more because I would have spent literally all my money. Which I shouldn't have done. I have to be a responsible adult sometimes and pay my rent and feed my pets. And eat food. But anyway, yeah, I did pick up those 2 physical copies because I love my physical copies of games. And I think it's so cool that like, I'm not always big on buying physical copies of PC games because like the digital, ecosystem is so good for those. But just having like, yeah, a couple games to display on my shelf and like the spines look super nice so I can put them on my shelf. And both of these, by the way, are available on Steam. These games, Luca, Born of a Dream and Slasher U. So if either of those games sound interesting to you, they are available on Steam. I don't know if you can get the cassettes, the physical copies online anywhere, but yeah. Anyway, I just want to say overall, QGCon was an amazing experience and I felt so welcomed. I love that it felt both like a conference and a convention, and I can see it growing into a lovely, wholesome hybrid of the two that creates kind of a bridge between queer creators and queer players, and even the non-queer general public as well, maybe, of course. I said at the beginning of the podcast, I have no idea if this is the organizer's intention, and if it's not, like, I'm not trying to, like, turn it into something that it's not, but the arcade and many of the panels felt like experiences for everyone. If there's an event next year, I would absolutely love to attend. I will be there immediately, for sure. Like, nothing will keep me away. My only real concern was that it's the same weekend as Tokyo Game Show, and I was wondering if that affected attendance, both like virtual or in person. I'm not sure how much overlap there is there. I just know that like Tokyo Game Show is like this huge thing and it has a lot of attention on it. And so I hope that didn't affect QGCon in any way. And again, I have no data to back up whether it was or was not affected. All I know is that like my feed outside of the event was entirely like, if I opened up Blue Sky, if I opened up news websites, it was like, oh, TGS this, TGS that. I haven't seen any news coverage of QGCon yet, and maybe I'm just not looking in the right places, but like there are websites I know that cover gaming news and they haven't talked about this at all. As far as I know, I am the only queer gaming outlet talking about QGCon, so hopefully that changes as they have more events too, because more people deserve to hear about this and from different perspectives as well. Just super quick, I'm going to talk about my time in Montreal. I had a really great time in Montreal. I took French up until about grade 10. So I went in Canada, you're required to take French until grade 9. And then they kind of like let you loose and take it if you want to. I took it in grade 10. It became a little overwhelming for me at that point. I've always been bad at learning new languages. I've learned a little bit of French in my lifetime and a little bit of Japanese. I was surprised at actually how much French I did know and was able to speak a little bit. Not so much in person, but I could read things, and I did open up a dating app and match with a trans man. And we kind of had this broken English/French, like this Fringlish conversation. And there was enough between the two of us that we could mostly understand what each other was saying, which I thought was super cute. Unfortunately, I had to return to Toronto, and this person lives in Montreal. So, it will never be, but it was super adorable and definitely a cute, like a nice little meet cute. I also got to meet a fan who is also a friend of a friend. I also got to meet Zoe Straw, who's been on the podcast multiple times, although her episode 11, when she was first on, is one of the most popular episodes of True Avatars ever. It's an audio-only episode, but I highly recommend going back to listen to it. There is a YouTube version. It's just, there's no video. It's just like the thumbnail with the audio playing. Zoe was kind enough to take me to where she works, and I am now, it's like late at night, it's like 11:30, and I'm trying to remember the name of I'm going to quickly look it up, the name of the developer. Astrolabe. So I got to go into Astrolabe after hours. Like, there are people there, but like they weren't like talking about anything. They weren't developing, working on any games. Got pictures. Spent some time with Zoe. It was really nice to meet her in person, which means the only one of my True Avatars regulars that I haven't met yet is Lloyd Lloydster. So I sent him like the poster for that horror movie You're Next with the guy standing in the like corridor with a knife, and I just kind of sent that to him, like, to let him, in a joking way. Obviously, I don't plan to kill Lloyd. I just want to give him a hug, but if he'll let me. But yeah, I just kind of said like, You're next. You're the last person on my list, because I met Cleo in person after I had her on the podcast, and everyone else who's been on the podcast as a regular is actually someone that I already knew in person from my life. So I also got to meet. I mentioned earlier, I kind of skipped over this. I met a fan and / friend of the podcast, and he gave super sweet. I actually met him for dinner after, and we talked. He helped me process kind of and just kind of trauma dump about the maybe trauma dump. So trauma dump is not the right word. Info dump about the Airbnb incident. But anyway, he was the person who said that he likes the podcast, and he likes most about it when we talk about what we've been playing. Yeah, and I tried there's lots of amazing vegan food. I got lots of great recommendations. Yeah, Montreal was a great time. I wish I hadn't gone for such a short amount of time, that I could have seen more of the city, although I have been to Montreal twice, once with friends, actually. Once I went with Graham, who's been on the podcast before, and another friend. And the time before that I was here, in Montreal, I didn't get to see anything because I went for GRS Montreal. It was the middle of the pandemic, and so I was just kind of like cooped up in a hotel room and very, very, very anxious about my surgery. Which went well. But yeah, so this is my third time to Montreal, and this is the first time since before my surgery being able to see the city. But the highlight was definitely all the queer gaming connections that were made both at the conference and outside of it. So, if any of this, it sounds interesting to you, getting to play queer game demos early in person, meeting the devs, everyone is super friendly, or just like having like queer connections and experiences in a gaming safe space for queer people, like, if any of this sounds interesting to you, I can't see why anyone from the general public should not be able to go and experience this and just like engage with it. And like, you never know where connections and opportunities might lead. So, I had an amazing time. I wish I had gone to day 3. I wish it had worked out that way, that I'd been able to, go on the Sunday and see things and experience things and play more games. But, I'm very grateful for all the connections made this weekend and all the games played and just the experience in general. Despite like the bad stuff that happened, I think the good outweighed it, very much so. So that's pretty much the podcast for QGCon. And if anyone has any questions about it, I do recommend like, reaching out through my DMs, like the True Avatars DMs or the comment section, leave a comment, or just, you want to just leave like a nice comment, like feel free. Because this is something that I would like to see more attention on, because I think it's such an amazing conference, and more people should know about it. So hopefully True Avatars can do its small part in bringing some attention to it. And thanks again to all the devs that I met, and sorry to all the devs that I didn't get the chance to meet. And yeah, in general, and if we spoke this weekend and we talked about an interview or we talked about a connection, please remember that you can reach out at any time, whether that's tomorrow or a year from now, and things get busy, like just whenever. I promise I will remember you, and if I don't, we will figure that out, but I'm sure I will remember you, because everyone is super memorable and super nice, and Hopefully a lot of nice stuff will come from the connections made here for the podcast. But yeah, that's pretty much it, so thank you so much. And that just about wraps up this week's show. Thanks, True Avatars, for joining me for another episode of your Queer Video Game Podcast. By listening to the show, you are supporting queer-made content, which is more important than ever. If you want to support True Avatars, it would be really great if you could leave a comment, rating, or review on your preferred podcast platform. You can follow the show on Blue Sky, Twitter, Threads, TikTok, and YouTube under the handle @TrueAvatars, all one word, and on Facebook and Instagram under True Avatars. If you are watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe, as well as hit the notification bell so you can be the first to know when new content drops. I welcome you to check out the official website, trueavatarspodcast.com. That's all one word, trueavatarspodcast.com. On the website, you can sign up for the newsletter, where you can get exclusive news and updates on the show. Bye, True Avatars. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to speaking with you all again next week. Take care and stay safe.